Hello, my name is Evans Mensah, and you can relive all the fun and excitement on Top Story, Newsnight, and of course, Ghana Connect via podcast. All you need to do is to log on to my Joy Online/podcast. Search for your favorite show and relive the moment. Joy 99.7 FM, your radio for discerning listeners.
Joy 99.7.
Let's take you live now to that event by the Ghana Statistical Service for the release of the preliminary report of the 2021 Population and Housing Census. To
join you here today on the occasion of the much anticipated release of the provisional results of the 2021 Population and Housing Census. It has been a long journey marked by significant milestones. We have, over this course, met on different occasions under varying circumstances as we have conferred with you, sought your inputs, received and given feedback on our progress, and sounded the call and invitation for all to be counted. Today is everybody's day. It is my pleasure to bid you a warm welcome, being part of the audience for this release. The Ghana Statistical Service is known and associated with many core statistics and indicators used by diverse groups for varied purposes. Every 10 or so years, we have, in partnership with you all, distinguished ourselves in the execution of one of the cornerstones of any national statistical system, the conduct of a national population census. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as you are by now aware, the Statistical Service is mandated by the Statistical Service Act 2019, Act 1003, to conduct a census every 10 years, and should have conducted in March last year the census of which we speak today. This could not happen due to COVID-19 related challenges. The service has persevered against all odds, and through the guidance, direction, and support of two high-level committees, namely the National Census Steering Committee and the National Publicity, Education, and Advocacy Committee, as well as committed and experienced technical teams. The service conducted the census 15 months later in June this year. Every census has its own challenges, but those of the 2021 Population and Housing Census are quite distinct. Being the country's first fully digital census and having it take place in an era when countries all the world over are grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, many national censuses that were to have been conducted by last year are yet at the planning stages. And Ghana's daring experience is both a source of inspiration and offers a package of lessons for other national statistical systems in our region. Ladies and gentlemen, the field data collection of the 2021 Population and Housing Census began on 13th June, when field officers visited our communities, our homes, and our boarding and lodging institutions, with the main enumeration taking place from 27th June, which was census night, and finally ending everywhere on 8th August 2021, Releasing provisional results today, 22nd September 2021, 44 days after, shows that indeed the electronic data collection in the 2021 Population and Housing Census in Ghana has yielded the anticipated benefits. Yet this is only the beginning of what we have gained from this bold step. Digitizing all the cartographic maps, the use of computer-assisted personal interviewing, CAPI, and capturing location data through GPS coordinates mean that the spatial representation of the data, our settlement patterns, and the proximity of the population and households to essential facilities has also been enabled. In the presentation that follows, you will judge for yourself what a laudable achievement this is and how worthwhile your contribution to this entire process and exercise is in the immediate and shall be for years to come. The census is one of many initiatives that will further the digitization agenda of the country. In this release, we who are physically present in this conference hall here in Accra are part of the larger audience comprising individuals with different backgrounds joining live on Facebook, YouTube, Zoom, and other electronic media and platforms, and others joining live television and radio transmission of this program. Ladies and gentlemen, it is heartwarming to have so many of you here and online. Your support to the census has come in various forms and have all gone towards us making these great strides and the impressive presentation of the results that you are about to witness. We are extremely grateful for all the invaluable support we have received at each and every stage of the census exercise. In particular, your being a faithful respondent. Let me take this opportunity to express, on behalf of the board and management of the Ghana Statistical Service, our sincere gratitude to all institutions and individuals, communities and businesses, and the entire population of Ghana for the support, collaboration, partnership, and response, which have all gone to make this exercise truly national in character and scope. We are very happy to note that by your presence among the audience, you are keenly interested in the work and products of the Ghana Statistical Service. We continue to count on your goodwill and hope that you will contribute towards the effective dissemination of the census and the use of the data for evidence-based decision-making. Finally, as we have reported on several occasions, the bulk of the funding of the census has been provided by the government. We recognize the presence of the chairperson of the National Census Publicity, Education, and Advocacy Committee, the Honorable Minister for Information, Kojo Opon Nkrumah, who is here to represent the support of government on the publicity, education, and advocacy side of the census implementation. May we invite you, sir, to say a few words before we proceed to the release of the results. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Bediako, government statistician, invited guests, distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the government and on behalf of the publicity committee associated with the census, we first want to congratulate the Ghana Statistical Service for 3 specific things. One, conducting a census, a national census of this nature is no small exercise. And we congratulate you on the fact that you've been able to successfully come to this stage of this exercise. Second is the fact that this time round, we have succeeded in executing this exercise through a very robust electronic backbone. And so, for conducting what we call the first digital census, we congratulate you. Third is the fact that COVID-19, as you mentioned, put the brakes on many national exercises, many census exercises in other parts of the world, but you, despite this, were able to brave the odds and to carry this through, and once again, we congratulate you. Government has not only been a supporter of the exercise, but government is also a potential user of the data that you are about to put out, starting with the provisional results from today. Like many other potential users, we are pleased that you've come this far and that you are going to provide us with data which we can use primarily for policy planning and government programs. We encourage all other stakeholders, including development partners and private sector operators, to pay attention to the various potential uses of this census data and to employ the data in your various activities. Specifically for us as government, we are looking to review the coordinated program of social and economic policies that was rolled out first in 2017 and which needs to be reviewed for the 2022-2026 period. And secondly, the Information Services Department seeks to work with the Ghana Statistical Service using this data as a direction tool on sampling, etc., to regularly gather data from the Ghanaian populace as feedback to government policies and programs. On behalf of government, once again, we congratulate you and we thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to know the number of seats in this room. And out of that, how many are occupied? And those occupying them, are they males or females? So these are details that we need in our daily planning. We went out to the nation to collect data, including the characteristics of the individuals in the country. We have our chief census officer and the government statistician to give us information as to the numbers that we have and some characteristics that goes with it. Professor Samuel Kobina-Eni.
The Honorable Minister, the Chairperson of the Ghana Statistical Service Board, members gathered here, especially the members of the media who would further carry on this dissemination results, our colleagues who have joined us online, good morning. Today, Ghana Statistical Service, 22nd September 2021, has the privilege to share with you the provisional results from the 2021 Population and Housing Census. As was indicated in the speech by the Chairperson of the Governing Board of Ghana Statistical Service, This marks 44 days after we exited the field. So based on our previous censuses and censuses in other jurisdictions, we have released or are releasing the provisional results in record time. We are not in a haste to put the numbers out there in today's dissemination. What we intend to do is to give you a context to the numbers and provide some definitions to guide the use of the numbers. Ghana Statistical Service is particularly mindful of this approach because anytime you put numbers out there without a careful consideration of the documentation of the processes that went into the data collection, it has the potential of enhancing misuse of the data. And this is contrary to one of the 10 guiding principles of the United Nations, which talks about preventing the misuse of statistics. So per my outline, what I'm going to do is give some prelude, and ahead of the numbers, I'm going to provide a context to it. May I request that we go to the next slide? So what I intend to do is walk you through the census journey as we've seen so far in the country. And when I talk about that, my reflection is not just on the processes that has ensued over the period, but the outcomes associated with the census methodology, and more importantly, how we hold persons accountable for the data that we put out there. Then in the prelude, I'll talk about how we did the digital census, and we would all recall that the Honorable Minister mentioned the COVID-19 era in doing a census. And in the prelude, I'll conclude with some markers which are very important as standards that we use in assessing the work that we've done. In terms of the context, as I indicated, it is important to emphasize the stage in which we are now, which is the resource advocacy strategy. And I must say that Ghana Statistical Service in the next 2 years would endlessly ensure that the data that we're going to put out there would be used. Then in that context, I'll permit you to allow me to talk about some considerations on population changes. This is very critical because the conversations that we're going to have with the media henceforth will be how we contextualize the changes that we've seen at the national level, at the regional level, to enhance our knowledge moving into the dissemination of the more detailed, wider scope and disaggregated data, which is going to be at the district and the locality level. Then I'll talk about the provisional results, which would help us put into the context. Then I'll move on to the 2021 provisional population and housing census data. I wouldn't just end there. I'll look at how this compares with other data sets that we have, both national and international, and close off this presentation with some headlines which our media men will be interested in putting out there. So in terms of the census journey, as I indicated, 3 things that we need to keep in mind is the mode of data collection that has changed over the period. Clearly now, as was indicated by the Honorable Minister, we are using a computer-assisted personal interview technique. This was not the case in 1960, 6 decades ago, when we were using paper and other means to collect data, which led to the keying in of the data that we collected from the field. In 2000, we had the benefit of moving forward where we used the scannable equipment to scan the data that we collected from the field. So from the mode of data collection point of view, we have really improved on how we collect data. Our effort is not going to end there moving forward. We've started some considerations to learn from other countries that are using other platforms, i.e. computer-assisted online data collection methods and computer-assisted telephone interview techniques to enrich the accuracy and the coverage of data that we need. As I indicated in my introductory remark, once we talk about the census journey, you don't only have to end at the data collection level, you have to think about the results and dissemination that comes with it, and more importantly, the accountability with regard to the use of the data. How have we conducted the digital census? We have done it from different perspectives, and Indeed, once you talk about a digital census, the first thing that comes to mind is automation. It doesn't really end there. There's great learnings going on across the globe, so we're able to tap into these learnings and then decided to use CAPI. But what is central about CAPI has to do with the extent to which you harness it, which has to do with the systems that we built and also the persons and operations that revolved around the automations and the building of the systems. A couple of examples. For the first time, as we are doing a computer-assisted personal interview, when the country procured 75,000 tablets, it sounded weird to us to think about loading all these 75,000 tablets with the information, i.e. the questionnaire, the maps that will be used for the data collection on a manual basis. So we needed to harness the use of CAPI by not loading the information on the tablets manually, but thinking about a provisioning system that would allow us to do it accurately and do it over a shorter period of time. Once you're thinking about a digital census, then the first thing has to do with minimizing the role of persons, and then think about how everyone will be re-designated to do something that will be useful to the census process. One of the things that we're going to see today is the resources that we are making available, and more importantly, the mode by which we are making the resources available. Ahead of the 2021 Population and Housing Census, Ghana Statistical Service was able to put on its website, that is the census website, all the materials, i.e. the questionnaires, the manuals that we needed for the undertaking of the exercise. One of the benefits that we got from that had to do with our field officers downloading these materials ahead of either the virtual training or the in-person training that we did. So this was what characterized the 2021 Population and Housing Census, that we don't just classify it as a digital census, but indeed a fully digital census, which is characterized by the extent to which you harness the use of computer-assisted personal interview. Along those lines had to do with the communication strategies that we developed. Indeed, in most of the media engagement that we did, most people asked the questions rhetorically, whether in previous censuses the public was indeed aware of the population and housing census. We did engage the public extensively for two reasons. One, because it was a digital census, and more importantly, doing a census in a COVID-19 era, which called for an intense discussion with the public to sustain the conversation and make room for the exercise to be undertaken. And we thank God that today we are seeing the provisional results of the 2021 Population and Housing Census. What and how are the markers for assessment? And I put this under 5 broad categories. I didn't delve into the benchmark indicators that we used, but we used them extensively to guide the accuracy of the exercise. As you all are aware, a census undertaking has 2 cardinal objectives: complete coverage and quality data. How do you do that? You can only achieve that when you have some benchmark information. We scouted extensively using projections, using historical data, both from censuses and surveys, and as per our census operations, we did a 1-week listing exercise where we got information for the first time on the Digiri household. So for that matter, in-house, we had data to benchmark the eventual enumeration with. We didn't just end there, but harness the resourcefulness of geospatial information, i.e. building footprints that captured the different structures that we have in the country. For which reason, during the listing exercise in enumeration areas that we deviated significantly from the building footprints, we used that as the benchmark. Moving forward with the use of computer-assisted personal interview, as I indicated, what makes it fully digital is how you harness its resourcefulness. We built in what we call the edit checks, which ensure that very basic errors would not be committed, i.e. a 3-year-old female who has 2 children. This is something that is not possible, so with the benefit of using computer-assisted personal interview, we're able to put in these auto checks to ensure that they do not surface, a disadvantage that occurred in the previous censuses. We didn't just end there, but with the use of CAPI, we were able to institutionalize a data quality monitoring team, which enabled us in near real time to assess the quality of the data that is coming through, and also instituted the use of an enumeration tracking dashboard, which allows us to view some information that is coming through based on the theoretical and expected values that we put in out there. So clearly, before the census, during the census, and post-census, there are a number of activities that we've institutionalized to ensure that we assess the quality of the census data. Currently, we are exiting the field from a post-enumeration exercise, which would be the final benchmark data that we're going to use to say that the enumeration exercise indeed is reliable to this margin of error. What I intend to talk about next has to do with our results advocacy strategy. For the first time in the history of census taking in Ghana, we engage users of the data in diverse ways, through in-person discussions, seminars on how the data would have to be used, and that didn't just end there, but how the data would have to be put out there to make it easily accessible. We went ahead to publish 100 ways by which the census data will be used, and in our publicity messaging on the census, we indicated that based on the different levels of disaggregation, i.e. 261 administrative districts, over 130 localities, disaggregating by residence, sex, we will be able to put out 2.6 million indicators at the minimum from the 2021 Population and Housing Census. We went ahead to also release a product release calendar, which the Deputy Government Statistician will speak to it in more detail. But in the product release calendar, we've outlined that next month, that is on the 19th of October, for the first time, we're going to do a proximity analysis, which was mentioned by the board chair, and this will give us a sense by which residences are distant from essential services, how essential services are far apart from each other, and recently what is called residential segregation, which talks about how residences are far apart. And on the 18th of November, we're going to put out the general report, which is going to put these figures, provisional figures, to its final values and make way for the deeper and more wider disaggregated analysis. In terms of our results advocacy strategy, we are witnessing the digital nature today. In previous releases by Ghana Statistical Service, we would have found a heap of reports ready to be disseminated. Today, all of us are going to leave here, that is those of us present, are going to leave here with an electronic device that has not only the report that we're putting out there, because we want to harness the full use of the data on the pen drive, you're going to have data from the 2000 census, the 2010 census, which would enable us to do the kind of analysis to better understand and appreciate how things have changed over time. This is one of the strategies that we're putting out there to ensure that we live up to our goal, which is endless desire to increase the uptake of data in the country. I switch over to talk about population changes. And permit me to do what I have been doing prior to, or I was doing prior to joining Ghana Statistical Service 2 years ago, which was staying in the classroom. And this is very important for us, especially for our colleagues in the media, because the conversations that we're going to have today will not be able to tell us the causes of the change. I know as we move around, people will be asking what has caused this to change in this particular region vis-a-vis these other regions. At this stage, what we're going to do is just give you a broad perspective of what causes changes in population over time and across different geographical areas. Our basic demography tells us that it's only 3 factors that will cause the population to change: fertility, mortality, and migration. What we need to think about is the level of influence that these 3 different variables would have on a population change. So number 2, I talk about you thinking about these 3 variables, i.e. fertility, mortality, migration, either as independent variables or variables that are interrelated. Indeed, these variables are interrelated. So anytime you are thinking about what is causing the population to change, and you say it is fertility, ask yourself whether the distant variable was not migration. And if you flip it, if you want to say that it's migration that is causing it to change, ask yourself whether it's not fertility that is a distant variable causing it to change. Because theoretically and empirically, there's a strong relationship between fertility, mortality, and migration. The second discussion that we're going to have is the level of disaggregation. Today, we are sharing with you population figures based on the national level figures and based on the regional level figures. We are not in a position at this level of aggregation to say that Ghana's population, which is largely driven by fertility, mortality, and migration, is as a result of fertility. That analysis can only be done when we do a more disaggregated analysis, i.e. at the district level. So today we are releasing to you figures that would whet our appetite ahead of the general results that we're going to put out there on 18th November 2021. The second consideration has to do with what I call the net effect squared. I call it the net effect because you have three variables that might cause the change in population: fertility, mortality, and migration. What you do not know is whether one has a superior impact over the other or otherwise. So you need to think about the net effect across these three variables. And also, if you think about a region, i.e. Ashanti region that has 47 districts, and the population of Ashanti region has changed, you can only talk about that change when you know how each of the 47 districts in Ashanti region played out. So you also need to think about the net effect at that geographical level. So the conversation moving forward on what has caused the population to change can only be better understood when we've analyzed these three variables, i.e. fertility, mortality, and migration in more detail, and also when we have information at the district level. About the provisional results. The provisional results qualifies as an official statistics, and we're going to put it out there for official use. We are cognizant of the fact that there is a potential of a variation between the provisional results and the final results. However, we are optimistic that that difference will be minimal. And once I share the results with you, and I share with you the comparability indicators, you would find reason why, ahead of the post-enumeration survey, which will be the final exercise to confirm the figures that we are putting out there, Ghana Statistical Service say on authority that our figure, that is the provisional results, is that close to the final results, and for that matter, policymakers can begin to use it as it is. How will the provisional results be different from the final results, or the general report for that matter? This is going to happen at three levels. As I indicated, we're going to change the designation from provisional results to final results. We're going to do a more deeper analysis at the district level, and also touch on the 11 modules that we had in the Population and Housing Census, i.e. issues around economic activity, migration, persons with difficulties in performing activities, housing, sanitation, and so on. Today, 22nd September 2021, Ghana Statistical Service, as was indicated, has the privilege to share with you the provisional results. How do we intend going about this? We're going to go about this by sharing with you the number of structures that we have in the country, the use of the structures that we have in the country, and the type of structures that we have in the country. We're going to proceed further by sharing with you the households across the different regions, and for that matter, at the national level. Move on to talk about the average household size at the national level, sizes at the regional level, and proceed to talk about growth rate in terms of how the population has changed in the last 6 decades, and also how they vary, or the sex composition for that matter, and the share of the population across our 16 administrative regions. I'm going to end off with the final release on the trends in the population of the country since 1960, of which I'm going to put out there the Provisional 2021 Population and Housing Census figure. We start with the number of structures that we have in Ghana. From the 2021 Population and Housing Census, a total of 10.7 structures were identified. For purposes of media and purposes of use of data moving forward, as I indicated, it's important to define what a structure is in a presentation like this. Ghana Statistical Service defined a structure as anything that is a building that is independent or separate, or it's an enclosure, would be at different levels of completion, and it's either movable or unmovable. So with that definition in mind, we put structures into different classifications, either based on their level of completion, what it is being used for, and also the type of structure that we have. So in terms of the completion of structures, we had 80% out of the 10.7 structures that were fully completed. Our headline message here is that as a country, we still have 20% of structures that are uncompleted. This saw significant changes across the 10 administrative regions. Specifically, we saw Greater Accra having the highest number of structures, 2.1 million structures, and the Northeast region having the least number of structures, that is 0.1 million, specifically 132,000 structures. Ashanti region had the highest percentage of uncompleted structures, which was in excess of the national level of 20% of structures that were uncompleted, with Ashanti region specifically having 22.7 structures that were uncompleted. In the Northeast region, where we recorded the highest number of completed structures, we saw that 9 in every 10 regions in the Northeast region, 9 in every 10 structures, in the Northeast region was completed. We turn to the use of structure. The use of structure was put into three categories: residential purposes, non-residential purposes, and a category that was difficult for us to define because it was at a stage of completion that one could not easily tell the extent to which the use or the purpose to which the structure would be put. So narrowing down from the 10.7 million structures, we identify a total of 9.8 million structures that could be classified as either residential or non-residential. In this categorization, we identify those that were used for only residential purposes, those that were used for only non-residential purposes, and those that were either used for residential or non-residential purposes. Out of the 9.8 million structures, we had 5.6 million that were used for only residential purposes and 4.0 million that were used for non-residential purposes. The remaining 0.3 million were used for both non-residential and residential purposes. Bono region recorded the highest number of residential purposes, proportion of residential purposes, specifically 80.5%, followed by Savannah region, 71.9%. Western North recorded the highest percentage of non-residential purposes, which was 46.9%, and clearly that was higher than the national figure, which hovered around 40%. Bono region had the highest percentage, 12.5% of structures that were used for both residential and non-residential purposes. And we saw that from the graph, if you have the Ghana map and you plot the structures on those and on the different regions that we have, we realize that residential structures are mainly concentrated in the southern part of the country, typically the regions along the coast and moving towards the Western North region and part of Volta, Eastern, and Ashanti region. So the headline was that residential structures are mainly concentrated in the southern part of the country, but as well acknowledging the concentration in the Upper East region. We turn to the type of structures. It's indeed important to define the categorization of the type of structures that we used during the 2021 Population and Housing Census. We put this into three main categories. That is, we had conventional structures, and our definition for conventional structures are buildings that were made of bricks, landcrete, sandcrete, mud. We included mud as one of the categories for conventional structures because of its predominance in the northern part of the country, and also put on the other side structures that were metal containers, structures that were wooden structures, and also those that we classify as kiosks. We are the fourth category that we classified as other because we are different shades of it. So based on these type of structures, we identified 7.7 million conventional structures constituting 78.7% out of the 9.8 million structures that we saw. 20% of structures in Ghana are either metal, wooden structure, or kiosks, which indicated that if you take off the conventional structures, which contributed almost 4 out of every 5 structures, the other 20%, leaving out the other category that is focusing on metal containers, wooden structures, and kiosks, we have 1 out of every 5 structures in Ghana being of this nature. That is either a metal container, wooden structure, or a kiosk. While in absolute terms, Greater Accra had the highest number of conventional structures, that is 1.3 million, it represented the least percentage, that is 67.4%, because of the predominance of metal containers in Greater Accra. From the data, we realized that 15% of the structures that we have in Greater Accra are metal containers. So in absolute terms, yes, we had 2.1 million structures in Greater Accra, but we have significant percentage of the 2.1 structures being of metal containers, specifically 15% of that. Moving forward, we also observed that more than half of the kiosks in the entire country are in Greater Accra. Specifically, 51% of the total number of kiosks that we have in the country are located in Greater Accra. Northeast region had the highest percentage of conventional structures, i.e. 95% of the total structures in Northeast region were conventional structures, i.e. were made by cement, landcrete, sandcrete, and mud. We turn the presentation to households. Again, in this regard, it is important to define how we went about data collection on households. We keep in mind 3 things, and we categorically distinguish between a household and a family when we are dealing with household and census-based data collection exercise. The first categorization has to do with, it could be a person or a group of people who have identified themselves to be living together. The second thing is that they do have a common living arrangement, and what we mean by that is at least decision-making on food and other essential services are collectively made by either by the group of persons who live in the household or, for that matter, that single member in the household. And the third categorization has to do with having identified one person of the persons who live together as the head of the household. So it's important that they make economic decisions together. And these economic decisions is directed by one person or managed by one person in that order. And then it could be either one person or more than one person could make these decisions. Following the 2021 Population and Housing Census, we identified a total of 8.4 million households in Ghana. The number of households in Ghana clearly continues to increase. And by saying that, since 1960, the number of households have increased sixfold, with the 8.4 million that was recorded from the 2021 Population and Housing Census. The number of households in absolute terms increased by 2.8 million comparing 2010 Population and Housing Census to the 2021 Population and Housing Census. This is 1.8 million lower than the difference that was recorded between 2000 and 2010. Between 2000 and 2010, the difference between the number of households was 1 million, and between 2010 and 2021 Population and Housing Census, the difference is 2.8 million. Greater Accra region recorded the highest number of households, specifically 1.7 million, followed by Ashanti region, 1.5 million. Northeast region has the least number of households. In the context of average household sizes, we recorded an average household size from the 2021 Population and Housing Census standing at 3.6. This indicates a sharp drop of 1.5 percentage points between the 5.1 that was recorded in the 2010 Population and Housing Census and the 3.6 that is being recorded for 2021 Population and Housing Census. Indeed, the 3.6 that we've recorded for the 2021 Population and Housing Census is the lowest ever since 1960. Regions in southern Ghana recorded the lowest average of household sizes, specifically with Greater Accra recording 3.2 household size and Eastern region equaling that same household size of 3.2. We recorded the highest average household size in the Northeast region with 6.0 household size. This was closely followed by Northern region and Savannah region. We turn to the population and we look at this based on the numbers, the density, the shares, and in discussing the numbers, the shares, and the densities, we're going to do that by the regions and then do that over time. In the 2010 Population and Housing Census, Greater Accra and Ashanti region collectively contained 35.3% of the persons that we had in the country. This has not significantly changed. In the 2021 Population and Housing Census, we are seeing a marginal increase from the two regions with a current figure of 35.7. What this inherently means is that Greater Accra region has caught up with Ashanti region. Indeed, from the provisional figures, we are seeing Greater Accra region edging up as the most populous region marginally. We await to see what we're going to get from the final results to declare that Greater Accra has overtaken Ashanti region, and for that matter, it is the most populous region. These two regions, that is Greater Accra region and Ashanti region, have respective populations of 5.4 million. The Ahafo region, which is the least populous region, has just 0.6 million persons in the region. And if you sum up the population of the 6 least populous regions, including Ahafo region, Oti region, Upper West region, Northeast region, the sum of these 6 regions do not equal the populations that we have recorded for Ashanti and Greater Accra region. Indeed, the shortfall of the sum of the population in these 6 regions is still 1 million less the 5.4 that we've recorded for Greater Accra region and Ashanti region. We turn to population density, which gives us a sense of the number of persons that live in an area defined as a square kilometer. And as I reflected on this and realizing that a number of the regions in the southern part of the country are the regions that are densely populated, I try to operationalize this to appreciate the severity of it. Think about a square kilometer in terms of meters, which has to do with 1,000 meters, and in Greater Accra, having in excess of 1,600 persons living in a square kilometer. So think about the space that is allowable for people in every meter. So literally, we are talking about 2 persons in every meter. That is the extent to which we need to appreciate the pressure that we are putting on the land, and for that matter, other facilities that comes with it. So we clearly see that in terms of densely populated regions, we are gravitating towards a dense, all of them are densely populated, while we see some sparsity for the regions in the northern part of the country. From the national perspective, we see a change from 0.3 persons for every square kilometer from the 2010 census to 110 for the 2021 Population and Housing Census. So at the national level, the pressure on the land has gone up just by 25 persons for every square kilometer. But think about what is happening in Greater Accra between 2010 and 2021. The change is 442 persons for every square kilometer for the period 2010 to 2021. Population changes and shares. Between 2010 and 2021 Population and Housing Census, with our 24.7 million that we recorded in 2010 and the current population figure that we have now, the population change over the period is 24.9. We've seen stark variations across the 16 administrative regions, specifically with the northern region recording a change of 49.6% and the least coming from eastern region 10.8%. The changes in shares were more pronounced in Greater Accra region. So if you compare the shares across the 16 administrative regions, the regions that recorded more pronounced changes had to do with what happened in the Greater Accra region and in the Ashanti region, especially when we saw a reverse pattern between these two regions. Indeed, the share of Ashanti region in 2010 was 19%, and this dropped to about 17.5% in 2021, and we saw the reverse in Greater Accra, which moved from about 16% in 2010 up to 17.5% in the 2021 Population and Housing Census. We turn to population growth rates. Annual intercensal population growth rates have ranged from 2.7 to 2.1. The highest that we recorded for the period 1984 and 2000 was 2.7, and the least that we've recorded since 1960 is 2.1. So this is the ever lowest that we are recording in terms of annualized growth rate during the intercensal period. So during the intercensal period, we compute the annual growth rate, and we recorded the highest in the period 1984 to 2000, which stood at 2.7, and the least has been recorded so far since independence, which stands at 2.1. Ladies and gentlemen, we now turn to the population over time. And we do this based on what was recorded in 1960 census, 1970 census, 1984 census, 2000 Population and Housing Census, and 2010 Population and Housing Census, and currently the 2021 Population and Housing Census. So starting with 6.7 in 1960, our population has increased to 30.8 persons in the country. Provisional results from the 2021 Population and Housing Census indicates that Ghana's population has increased from 24.7 in 2010 to 30.8 from the 2021 Population and Housing Census provisional results. We now turn to the comparability of this figure, which helps us to repose confidence in the number that we've put out there, and as I indicated, ahead of the post-enumeration survey results and ahead of 18th November 2021. We do this at 3 levels: comparison using the US Census Bureau, using the United Nations Population Reference, and from our own population projections based on the 2010 Population and Housing Census. Comparing it across these 3 indicators, we remain within 5% of the population US Census Bureau reference point, that is the 30.8 million that we've recorded as provisional results for the 2021 Population and Housing Census is within 5% of the US Census Bureau results. And it's within our own population projections and the United Nations population projections by just 3%. It is on this basis that we say that our Population and Housing Census provisional figure of 30.8 that we're putting out there to persons in Ghana and beyond today is hypothesized that it would not significantly vary from the final figure that we're going to put out on 18 November 2021. How does this number compare from 2 perspectives? It's always important to look at the number of males and females that you have and also the source of the data collection. So starting with the females and males, we continue to see that Ghana has more females than males, specifically having 50.7% of our population being females and 49.3% of our population being males. It is also important that these males and females vary significantly across the 16 administrative regions. So although at the national level, we see a percentage change of 1.4 between females and males, that is, females being 1.4 percentage points higher than males, we see variations across the 16 administrative regions. Specifically, we find that the Volta region has the highest number of females relative to males, and also on the other side, we find that in the Western North region, we have more males than females to the percentage difference of 2.5%. So we have a number of regions, specifically 6 of the regions having more males than females, and 10 out of the 16 regions having more females than males. So indeed, looking forward to the disaggregated results, there's going to be quite some differences in terms of the shares of females and males across the 261 administrative regions. Finally, we look at the disaggregation of the population by household population and non-household population. Per the procedure of the 2021 Population and Housing Census, we had 7 instruments that captured the population from different sources. One is the household population, that is persons who spent the 27th night in households in the country, and persons who spent 27 June, the night of 27 June, in non-household populations, i.e. institutions, hospitals, and other lodging facilities. And we realized that from the data, most of the persons that we identified during the 2021 Population and Housing Census came from the households relative to the non-household population. And indeed, it ordered to the level of less than 1 million for the non-household population. We now turn to how we want the data to be engaged moving forward. Clearly, the 30.8 million that we've put out there suggests that our population have gone up by 6.1 million since the 2010 Population and Housing Census. This simply means that in the last 7 years, on the average, every year we've added on 554 persons in the country. Over the last 6 decades, our population has increased in the order of 5-fold. This is how we characterize the 2021 Population and Housing Census provisional figure of 30.8 million persons. What we intend doing is to put out there the report, and this is how the report that we're putting out there looks like, titled Ghana 2021 Population and Housing Census, the preliminary report. And this is how the report looked like. And as I indicated, this is a digital census, so we're not finding a heap of the reports out there. Every person here is going to be given a pen drive that does not contain only the report, but contains some other information, trends, 2010 Population and Housing Census report, and also the questionnaire that we use for the data collection, all in our effort to ensure that there's endless desire to increase the uptake of data use in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Prof has told us the figures, some characteristics of the figures. Now is our questions time. Would like to have the questions up. 3 people coming up with the questions. You didn't get a picture? Okay, all right.
Right, so there you have it. We know the number of people in Ghana as of census night, and it stands at 30.8 million. And looking at the female-male representation, the women outnumber the men by some 400,000. So that hasn't changed at all. So it's time for questions, and we're going to be hearing from the questions that are going to be coming up. But certainly, there's a lot to chew on. If you're looking at the number of structures that we have in the country, the number of conventional structures, the number of containers that make up the number of structures we have in the country, the distribution of the structures, where it's obvious that there's a lot more concentration when it comes to the southern part of the country. But then when you go to the upper east region, to the indicator that there's a concentration there as well. But there's a lot to chew on as far as these figures are concerned. And over the next few days, we're going to be doing that. But we're going back to the Nat Hall, where we're going to be hearing the questions that people, the journalists who are gathered there, are going to be asking. But that'll be it for News Desk. We'll have Mapitsu Sebede taking over subsequently. We're going over right now to the Nat Hall.
Any other, please?
Thank you very much. For me, I was not counted. And now that the provisional results is out, is there an opportunity for some of us to get the opportunity to be counted so that the numbers can increase at least by one?
Any other, please? Any other? Moses, behind.
Thank you. My name is Winston. I'm with Metro TV. Please, Prof, we don't heard about the post-enumeration result and how it has influenced the outcome of this particular provisional report and the figures stated.
All right. Are there any more? Prof, can you please go ahead? But yeah.
Thank you very much. These are three very important questions. Let me begin with the first one to provide clarity on the 6.1 million change between the 2010 and the 2021 population and housing census. In 2010, we recorded 24.7 million persons in Ghana, and in 2021 population and housing census, based on the provisional results, is 30.8 million persons in Ghana. So 30.8 minus 24.7 is the basis for the 6.1 million persons that we've had in the country. We also indicated that in the last 6 decades, or put differently, since independence, we've seen a 5-fold change in our population, because in 1960, our population was around 6.5, and now we are recording 30.8. So this is the basis for indicating that our population since independence, 1957, has gone up 5-fold. The second question on I was not counted, it's always an important question to us because it helps put the numbers in perspective. We need to appreciate the different reasons for somebody to say that I was not counted. One very big possible reason is that we need not have contact with all the 30.8 million persons in the country. Once we visit the 8.3 million households that are indicated, and we identify the head of the household or any responsible adult in the household, that person would speak on behalf of all the persons in the household. So as part of our public messaging with persons who came up to indicate that they were not counted, we asked them to first check with persons in their household. And indeed, significant persons came back indicating that after consultation, an enumerator has visited their household. On the other side, one of the sources of variation, possible variation between the provisional results and the final result is clearly there were places that we had refusals, there were places that we have boundary issues that we are still dealing with, specifically around the Adan East, Adan West area. These are places that we did the listing exercise based on information from neighbors. So moving into the final results, we're going to estimate these population and we're going to add it on. We've done the estimation and we say that it would not vary significantly from the 30.8 that we've put out there. Not just because of the comparability that we did, but we've already estimated these people that for one reason, either refusals, boundary challenges, or whatever, would not vary that number significantly. So we still would work with 30.8 as a provisional figure. The last question on the post-enumeration survey, it's also indeed an important one. As I indicated, we've just exited the data collection exercise. we're going to do the two major steps, which are matching and reconciliation of the data with what we got from the enumeration. But we are always guided by the independence of the post-enumeration survey. It is not just an issue of coverage, it's an issue of both coverage and the quality of data. We are putting this figure out there as we finalize the matching and reconciliation exercise. Indeed, once we do the exercise and it leads to a 0.1 variation in it, it's up to us to say that let's work with the provisional results because it's not going to change the figure statistically in any way. But then we'll say that this is what we got from the post-enumeration survey, so that we'll continue to keep the independence of the post-enumeration survey, having put out this provisional results from the enumeration of the 2021 Population and Housing Census. Thank you.
Please, are there any more questions? Moses.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mine is not a question, but really to commend the Ghana Statistical Service and the government of Ghana in general to really release timely results, although they are provisional, but these are the figures we'll be using in the decision making. So from UNFPA, we are very proud of the achievements. This is very great and important for decision making and programming. We'll be using results as we look forward to the November release of the final results. Thank you once again and congratulations.
Any more questions? I know this is being streamed. Those handling the virtual session, are there questions from the virtual side that we have to address? All right. If we don't have any further questions, then we end our questions and answers session. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Dori Nando. You can catch up with all the fun on the Cosmopolitan Mix and on all our shows via podcast. Just go to My Joy Online podcast and search for your favorite show and relive those moments all over again. Only on Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
Super Hits Radio, Joy 99.7.
working with you, even to finishing even in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frimpong Ingwa. We are so grateful to have a successful event, and we need to thank God for bringing us this far. So we are closing and would love that Mr. Mohamed Abdullahi will take us through the closing prayer.
Please, shall we be on our feet for prayers?